Marcus Hale stood before the Galactic Senate, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The chamber, a vast, circular coliseum of floating platforms, was filled with the murmurs and laughter of alien delegates. Towering reptilians with scaled frills hissed in amusement, gelatinous diplomats from the Olath Consortium rippled with mirth, and even the usually somber Cathari, their elongated faces unreadable, allowed themselves the slightest twitch of their mandibles, a sign of amusement in their species. Marcus had been here before. He had warned them before. And just like every time prior, they were laughing at him. He slammed his palm against the speaker's podium, silencing the chamber. "The Threx Dominion is coming," he said, voice cold and firm. "And if we don't stand together, they will wipe us out. Every species in this room, every colony in this galaxy, will fall." A delegate from the Ulari, a feline race with sleek, spotted fur and golden eyes, flicked her tail dismissively. "And you humans think you can stop them?" She smirked. "You burn bright, but you burn fast. You're nothing but a young, fragile species trying to punch above its weight." More laughter rippled through the Senate. Marcus forced himself to stay calm, though his blood boiled. It was always the same. The so-called elder species had existed for tens of thousands of years, forming alliances and treaties, forging a political dance of power that humans had only recently been invited to join. And they never let humanity forget it. He met the glowing, bioluminescent eyes of a Zelthran official, the deep-set gaze of a Malvarian warlord. Each species had its own reputation. The Zelthran were master tacticians. The Malvarians bred warriors from birth. The Drelli could manipulate gravity itself. And humans? They were the joke of the galaxy. Marcus exhaled sharply. "The Threx don't care who's old and who's young. They don't play by your rules. They take what they want, and what they want is everything." The room was already turning away from him. Eyes closed. Tentacles shifting. A sign they were done listening. Then, a chime rang through the chamber. A high-pitched voice, belonging to the Senate's AI moderator, spoke. "Urgent transmission from the Arcturus colony." The laughter stopped. A hologram flared to life in the center of the chamber. A human officer, face streaked with blood, his uniform torn and scorched. "This is Captain Lorne of the Arcturus Defense Fleet," static crackled. Explosions in the background. "The Threx have arrived. We're losing ground." Another explosion rocked the transmission. "Anyone receiving this, help us. For God's sake." The feed cut to black. A heavy silence hung over the chamber. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "Well?" He looked around, eyes burning with anger. "Are you still laughing?" The void of space above Arcturus colony was alight with fire. The sleek, predatory ships of the Threx Dominion descended like a swarm of locusts, their crimson energy lances carving through the colony's meager defenses. What few defense platforms the humans had were already in ruins, their shattered hulks drifting through the blackness. Captain Elaine Carter stood on the bridge of the UNS Valiant, gripping the edge of her command console as another blast rocked the ship. The Valiant was one of only 6 human warships in the sector, and against the overwhelming force of the Threx, it might as well have been a rowboat against a tidal wave. Her comms officer, Ensign Patel, turned, sweat glistening on his brow. "No response from the Galactic Fleet, ma'am. No reinforcements. We're on our own." "Of course, we are." Carter swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat. The other species had dismissed humanity as weak, but here they were, the only line of defense between the Threx and the defenseless colonists below. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Ornov, cursed under his breath. "Threx troop ships are moving in. They'll hit the colony in minutes." Carter took a slow breath, forcing her mind to clear. Fear wouldn't help them now. She turned to her crew, eyes sharp with determination. "If no one else will fight, then we will," she said. "Prepare for a low-altitude assault. We take the fight to them." Gasps rang out from the bridge. No one had ever dared to fight the Threx in close quarters, not willingly. Aronov hesitated. "Ma'am, you're talking about knife-fighting range." Carter's lips curled into a dangerous grin. "Exactly." The Valiant and her sister ships roared into the upper atmosphere, engines burning hot as they closed the distance to the Threx landing craft. Human warships weren't as heavily armed as those of the elder species, but what they lacked in raw power, they made up for in maneuverability and audacity. "Bring us right between their formations," Carter ordered. Aronov blinked. "That's suicide." "No. That's human warfare." The Valiant twisted through the chaos, skimming the surface of an enemy troop carrier. Its point defense turrets, meant for long-range engagements, couldn't track the human vessel fast enough. Carter's ships weaved between the massive enemy hulls, firing at exposed thrusters and critical weak points. The Threx, unprepared for this kind of reckless aggression, faltered. Explosions erupted across their fleet. One of their carriers, its engines crippled, spiraled downward, crashing into the colony's mountains. On the surface, human marines and colony defenders rallied. With the enemy forces disrupted, they launched a counterattack, catching the Threx off guard. For the first time in history, the Threx Dominion met resistance they hadn't anticipated. And they bled. Hours later, as the dust settled, the Valiant drifted among the wreckage. The battle was won, but at a cost. 3 of the 6 human ships were gone. Thousands were dead. Carter sat in her chair, exhausted but defiant. She opened a channel to the Galactic Senate. The faces of various alien diplomats filled the screen, their expressions ranging from shock to something else, respect. "We held the line," Carter said, her voice calm but firm. "But we won't survive another fight alone." For the first time, no one laughed. Admiral Zell Varn watched the battle footage in stunned silence. His elongated fingers, usually steady and composed, twitched slightly as he replayed the human assault on Arcturus colony for the 3rd time. The Senate had dismissed them as primitive, reckless, short-lived and unremarkable. But the way they fought. "They're insane," murmured one of his sub-commanders, a Cathari with dark, chitinous skin. "No rational species engages the Threx at such close range." Zell Varn didn't respond immediately. His deep-set eyes remained locked on the footage. The humans had turned their own weaknesses, fragile bodies, weaker ships, into advantages. Where other species relied on overwhelming firepower and calculated strategies, the humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Because they expected to die. Zell Varn exhaled, his mandibles clicking together. And yet, they won. In the days following the Battle of Arcturus, something shifted in the Galactic Senate. No one openly admitted they had been wrong about humanity, but the murmurs of doubt had stopped. The elder species still saw humans as reckless, but now, they also saw them as useful. Marcus Hale was invited to a closed-door session with the High Council, a meeting he never would have been allowed into before. He entered the Grand Chamber to find Admiral Zell Varn already waiting, along with representatives from several powerful species. The Ulari delegate, the same feline woman who had mocked him before, looked at him with narrowed eyes. "We need to understand how your kind fights." Marcus smirked. "I thought we were just fragile creatures who burn out too quickly." The Ulari's tail twitched in irritation. Zell Varn raised a hand. "The Threx do not fear our fleets. They have studied our tactics for centuries. They predict our movements before we make them." His dark gaze met Marcus's. "But they do not understand yours." Marcus folded his arms. "And now you want us to teach you?" A heavy silence filled the chamber. The pride of the elder species was a delicate thing. But the cold reality of war was even stronger. Finally, the Ulari delegate spoke. "Yes." Marcus let the moment stretch before nodding. "Then listen carefully." What followed was something no one in the galaxy had seen before. An interspecies war school. Human captains trained alien officers in the art of deception. How to feint, to lure an enemy into a trap, to fight dirty. Marine instructors drilled Cathari warriors on human ground combat, teaching them ambush tactics, guerrilla strikes, and something humans called adaptive chaos. The Cathari, used to rigid battle formations, struggled at first, until they realized that unpredictability worked. Admiral Zell Varn himself studied alongside human tacticians, analyzing historical battles that no other species would have dared attempt. The Threx expected enemies to fight in patterns. Humans didn't. And as the first joint counteroffensive was planned, Marcus watched with grim satisfaction. The galaxy was finally learning what it meant to fight like a human. And soon, the Threx would learn too. The bridge of the UNS Warspite was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of fingers against control panels and the faint hum of the ship's systems. Outside the viewport, the vastness of space was filled with the looming presence of the Threx fleet. Their ships were monstrous, jagged constructs of blackened metal, built for one purpose: conquest. Captain Elaine Carter stood with her hands behind her back, eyes locked on the enemy formation. This was it. The first real counteroffensive. The first time humanity and the elder species would fight together, using human strategies. The old admirals had drawn up careful, calculated plans. They wanted a slow, methodical approach. Carter had torn those plans to shreds. "Status on the fleet?" she asked. A Zelthran officer, Lieutenant Valsari, responded, his bioluminescent eyes pulsing with what she had learned was unease. Our allies are in position, but they are hesitant. Of course, they were. Every species in the coalition had spent millennia fighting by the book. Today, Carter was about to rip that book apart. She activated the fleet-wide comms. This is Captain Carter to all ships. The Threx expect you to fight the way you always have. They expect formation tactics. They expect predictability. They expect fear. She paused, her voice dropping to a dangerous edge. So we're going to give them hell instead. She turned to her helmsman. Take us in. The Warspite led the charge, engines burning hot as it barreled straight toward the Threx fleet. Behind it, the coalition forces followed, but they no longer moved in rigid formations. Instead, they weaved unpredictably, each ship moving as if it had a mind of its own. The Threx hesitated. Then, the first salvo of human torpedoes struck, not at the Threx battleships, but at the debris fields nearby. The explosion sent a cloud of shattered metal and asteroid fragments into the Threx fleet, forcing them to scatter. Carter smiled. They're reacting. Good. In the past, the Threx would have crushed their enemies in an overwhelming frontal assault. But now, the battlefield wasn't something they controlled. It was chaos. And humans thrived in chaos. Small strike teams of human and Cathari Marines infiltrated Threx vessels using stolen entry codes, sabotaging their engines before slipping away into the void. Malvarian warships, once slow and predictable, now used human-inspired flanking tactics to tear apart isolated Threx cruisers. Admiral Zel Varn, aboard his command vessel, watched in astonishment. They are winning, he murmured. Marcus Hale, watching from the Senate war room, leaned forward, numb. They're teaching you how to win. By the time the battle ended, the once invincible Threx fleet was in full retreat. The impossible had happened. The galaxy had learned to fight like humans. And the Threx Dominion was about to learn what true fear felt like. The sky above Earth burned. The Threx had come. Not in a probing attack, not in scattered raids, but in full force. Their fleet darkened the stars, a churning mass of destruction that stretched from Luna to Mars. The Galactic Coalition had fought like hell to keep them away, but this was the last stand. Humanity's homeworld. Captain Elaine Carter stood on the bridge of the UNS Warspite, her uniform stained with sweat, her body running on nothing but adrenaline and defiance. Around her, the Sol defense fleet braced for the impossible. They were outnumbered 10-1. But running was never an option. Enemy fleet is in range, her tactical officer, Aronov, reported. They're broadcasting something. Carter narrowed her eyes. The Threx had never talked before. Put it through. A guttural voice, like grinding stone, echoed through the bridge speakers. Humans. You fight harder than we expected. But this world belongs to us now. Carter exhaled slowly. Open channel. A soft chime. She stepped forward. This is Captain Carter of the Warspite, she said. You think Earth belongs to you? Come and take it. Then, she cut the channel. And fired the first shot. The Sol system erupted into war. The Coalition fleet fought with a desperation that no battle in history had ever seen. Malvarian warships, now using human-inspired hit-and-run tactics, harassed the Threx flanks. Cathari shock troopers launched daring boarding actions, turning Threx battleships into blood-soaked battlegrounds. Even the Elder races, once dismissive of human warfare, now fought with reckless creativity. But it wasn't enough. The Threx kept coming. Their dreadnoughts punched through Earth's orbital defenses, their troop carriers streaking toward the planet's surface. On the ground, Marcus Hale stood on the crumbling walls of Geneva's last fortress, watching the sky fill with fire. Civilians had been evacuated deep underground, but if the Threx reached them, there would be no escape. The fight had come down to this. He turned to the alien commander beside him, Admiral Zel Varn. The same Zel Varn who had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now clutched a plasma rifle in his four-fingered hands, his mandibles tight with grim determination. Marcus smirked. Still think we're weak? Zel Varn's bioluminescent eyes pulsed. No. He checked his weapon. Now, I think we are brothers. Then the Threx landed. In orbit, the Warspite was on its last legs. Carter's ship had lost main power. Half her crew was dead. But as long as she could draw breath, she would fight. She watched as the Threx flagship loomed ahead, preparing to deliver the final blow. A soft whisper crackled through the comms. A coded message. She smiled. "Brace for impact," she said. And then, from the far side of the battle, a fleet cloaked in darkness emerged. The remnants of humanity's stealth forces. Ships that had gone silent weeks ago, slipping through enemy lines. They had waited for this moment. They struck like ghosts, unleashing everything they had into the Threx command vessels. The tide turned. One by one, the Threx warships faltered. Their dreadnoughts broke apart. Their ground forces, cut off, leaderless, began to fall. The impossible happened. Humanity did not die. Humanity won. As the last Threx ship retreated into the void, the battered remnants of the coalition stood in stunned silence. They had survived. Earth still stood. And the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The halls of the Galactic Senate were silent. Not the silence of mockery, not the silence of dismissal, but the silence of remembrance. Every species in the chamber had lost something in the war. The Cathari had sacrificed entire fleets. The Malvarians had lost generations of warriors. The once mighty Ulari homeworld had been scarred by Threx fire. And humanity. Humanity had bled more than anyone. A grand memorial now stood in the heart of the Senate, a towering sculpture of metal and stone. It bore no names, no single race's insignia. Only a single phrase, translated into every language known to the galaxy. For those who fought, so others may live. Marcus Hale stood before the assembled delegates, his uniform pressed but worn at the edges, his face lined with exhaustion. He had spent years fighting for humanity's voice to be heard. Now, the galaxy hung on his every word. "We once stood here as outsiders," he said, his voice steady. "You called us reckless. You called us fragile." His eyes swept across the room. "You were wrong." A murmur rippled through the chamber, not of dissent, but of agreement. Admiral Zel Varn, standing beside him, stepped forward. The elder races had never admitted fault before. But the war had changed them, just as it had changed humanity. He bowed his head. "We did not understand you," he said. "But we have learned." He gestured to the gathered delegates. "All of us have. And for that, we owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Silence again. But this time, it was heavy with respect. The war had been won, but its scars remained. Earth was rebuilding. The coalition was reforging itself into something stronger. The Threx Dominion, once the galaxy's greatest threat, had retreated to the shadows, nursing their wounds. But one thing was certain. The species of the galaxy would never again mock humanity. They would study them. They would fear them. And, when the next war came, they would follow them. Because humanity had proven one thing beyond all doubt. They were not the joke of the galaxy. They were its warriors. And no one would forget that again.